Hello again. Um, Welcome to this lecture. Mostly cover King Lear, the first two acts. So I wouldn't listen to this one if you haven't. If you finish Act One, only go ahead and read Act Two before you come up back and listen to this lecture. And I'll try to do another one for the conclusion of the play later on. And just a couple things to know. Just remember, there is not going to be a final exam anymore in the class. Let me do something about that lens flare. This is looking like a J.J. Abrams movie. Hang on. Well, now it's directly behind me. There we go. No? I'll just block it with my head. All right. There's not going to be any final exam. So the only assessment that there's going to be left in the class, aside from what's already graded, the paper in the midterm, will be a final essay, which you'll have a lot of sort of leeway to decide what you want to write about. This is sort of the fairest way to do it, I think, because everybody's in such different circumstances when it comes to access to technology, when it comes to the time they have available, when it comes to their personal circumstances. So I'm trying to make things as sort of easy as possible. And I do still want to talk about Shakespeare as much as I can. At the same time, I'm doing now 7 classes online and spending all day, every weekday, homeschooling my son. And so I'm also finding it difficult to manage everything. I feel like I'm spinning plates, and it's not easy. So I know it's not easy for you either. So just remember that when I'm talking about these plays, that there's no final exam that's happening. Everything's about whatever you decide to write about for your final essay. That being said, it is a Shakespeare class, and you should try to get as much Shakespeare content as you can, or as we can, for the purposes of perseverance, I guess you could say, right? Trying to keep things as normal as possible. Of course, they're not normal. So, King Lear. I do have some additional notes and stuff I'm going to put up about As You Like It. Now, you probably noticed we didn't talk much about genre yet, but we have, in As You Like It, sandwiched between Hamlet and King Lear, we have a great example of the contrast between comedy as a genre and tragedy. And it's not just about laughs, right? In fact, the jokes are secondary. There's a lot of funny stuff in As You Like It. A lot of stuff that still feels sort of modern and fresh in terms of comedy, one of the things that's touching about reading a play like As You Like It is to see just sort of how universal some human behaviors are, or temporally, right? 400 years ago, 500 years ago, people still felt about love and talked about love in a way that's not that dissimilar from the way we do. Obviously, there are differences, but in Act 3 of As You Like It, one of my favorite moments of the play, in Act 3 of As You Like It, when Celia tells Rosalind that there's a man who's shown up in the Forest of Arden, and Rosalind's like, "Who is it? I don't care, some guy, right?" And this is page 446. And line 187, Rosalind's like, "Well, what manner of man? Is his head worth a hat, or is his chin worth a beard? Is he a man of some estimation?" And Celia says, "Nay, he hath but a little beard. He's a young man." And Rosalind says, "Why, God will send more if the man will be thankful. Let me stay in the growth of his beard if thou delay me not the knowledge of his chin." Which is a basic fancy way of saying, well, who is it, right? Who's behind the beard? And Celia says, "It is young Orlando that tripped up the wrestler's heels and your heart both in an instant." And immediately Rosalind's demeanor changes, right? From being sort of sarcastic to being, "Nay, but the devil take mocking. Speak, sad brow and true maid." And like, you're joking me, you're kidding me, you're pulling my leg. And Celia says, "In faith, cause 'tis he." And Rosalind says, "Orlando?" And Celia says, "Orlando." And Rosalind, then my favorite line in the play, "Alas, the day! What shall I do with my doublet and hose?" What did he say when I sauced him? What said he? How looked he? Where and went he? What makes he here? Did he ask for me? Where remains he? How parted he with thee? And when shall I see him again? Answer me in one word. The sort of the question after question that comes pouring out of her as she sort of starts to, as she, all her composure, all her sort of cool detachment, all her sort of sarcasm melts away into this sort of frantic, like, did you see him? What did he say? What did he look like? Did he ask about me? What was he wearing? When are you going to see him again? Answer me, hurry. And moments like that and As You Like It are a good reminder that that we can identify with these characters still as far away as they are from us temporally. That being said, I mean, my real point here is, what is it that made As You Like It a comedy? Aside from all, the jokes and the laugh lines and the fool and the sort of ins and out of the cross dressing, right? Rosalind dressed as Ganymede, teaching Orlando how to court, pretending she's a boy, and the gender bending stuff, right? It's the fact that it ends the way it ends, right? How does it end? With a bunch of marriages, right? With a bunch of lovers paired off and a happy ending, and seeing all these couples on stage, right? Comedies end happily. Comedies end typically with lovers being paired off. How do tragedies end? Tragedies end with a stage full of corpses, as opposed to a stage full of couples. So couples in comedy, corpses in tragedy. Happy ending, sad ending. That's the key distinction here between these genres. And that might seem simplistic, but a lot of times it doesn't take... A lot of times the differences between a tragedy and a comedy aren't all that apparent until the ending. I mean, take a play like Romeo and Juliet. We all know how that one ends. You could easily envision that play being a comedy. Up until that moment, there's a lot of, aside from, Mercutio being killed and stuff, and, people get killed in comedies. It does happen. But there's an opportunity for all the hijinks to work and for everything to come off happily at the end of that play until everything goes wrong, right? So sometimes the line between a comedy and a tragedy can be pretty thin, right? And really come down to, well, who's standing on the stage at the end? Is it a happy couple, or multiple happy couples, or is it corpses? In the case of Romeo and Juliet, it's corpses, right? And so that brings us to King Lear. Without question, one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, although a really difficult play to, where is it? A really difficult play to perform. And in some ways, a really difficult play to stomach. It's probably Shakespeare's darkest play emotionally and philosophically. Hamlet is probably Shakespeare's greatest intellectual construct, right? The greatest challenge he offered to our intellect. But King Lear is probably the biggest challenge to us emotionally or even spiritually. I know that sounds all kind of hokey and corny, and I apologize but I can't think of a better way to put it. There is nothing. You get through this play, and there's very little you can take away from it that's positive. Hamlet. Hamlet. At least you have the sense that there's a fresh start, right? The sort of the toxic generation has been purged from the court, and Horatio is left to tell the story. Maybe King Lear. It's really hard to draw any optimism from anything that happens. And along the way, this is a play that's going to challenge our most fundamental beliefs, even about what it means to be human. And maybe it's something that doesn't seem as dramatic to us today in the modern world, in the post-Darwinian world, where we understand the biological relationship between humans and animals. We know on an intellectual level, at least, that we are just animals, right? Who have evolved to have higher intellectual faculties than most animals, but we're still mammals, right? You can slot us into the the what's the word for that? Where they have the branches of all the different taxonomy, right? The taxonomy of primates or whatever. Is taxonomy the right word? I'm going to look that up later. If it's not, send me an email. Let me know. I should enable. You can comment on these, by the way. You know, so feel free to drop some corrections in the comments. But in Shakespeare's time, you know, there is and you know, long after Shakespeare's time, into the 20th century, the general belief was that human beings were special, right? That we weren't just animals, that we were made in the image of the divine. King Lear is a play that directly confronts that idea and questions it, if not outright rejecting it. I mean, and whether it rejects it or just questions it or challenges it is something that's sort of left to argument, interpretation, right? But you'll see a lot in this play about the boundaries between man and beast, between human and animal. It's one of the key focuses of this play. And that's important because, right, from a tragic perspective, if we are just animals, right, and if you can strip away the stuff that lets us pretend that we're not, it really gets to the question of what any of this even means. Right? Which is also something that Hamlet touched on a little bit, right? What is this quintessence of dust, Hamlet said. But even that question, what is this quintessence of dust, is drawn from a biblical source, right? The book of Genesis, and it applies a connection to the divine. Now, King Lear is set in a primitive, pagan, pre-Christian world. Unlike Hamlet, unlike Hamlet, or As You Like It, it doesn't take place in some exotic locale. It takes place in Britain, not England, but in Britain. And the distinction between Britain and England is a pedantic one that I don't have time to get into now, though I love the subject. Suffice it to say that we say Britain because England didn't exist yet. It takes place in a primitive past, before Christianity, before Englishness, right? Before the idea of nationhood. And even kind of pre-Arthurian, you know? It's a really primitive environment. That's reflected a lot in the language. There's not a lot of beautiful, mellifluous poetry in this play. There's a lot of harsh language, a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say guttural, but a lot of directness, a lot of frankness, a lot of clangy sorts of consonant sounds. But also in the sort of theological perspectives of the characters. And we're going to talk about that right away when we get to Gloucester and Kent. This question of the relationship between man and the gods, whatever those are. There's no specificity here, right? But there is no God. It's not God or Jesus or something like that. They talk of gods, plural, in this primitive pagan way. Sorry, I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I mean from Shakespeare's perspective, right? Polytheism was primitive compared to Christianity, but in some ways, well, I want to move on from these sort of general questions, right? But anyway, the question of destiny or fate, our relationship between humans and the gods. How much do the gods control us? How much do forces beyond our control shape our destiny, right? Which is a question we've talked about before in Henry V, right? When he tells everybody God fought for us. Oh, did he? How do you know? Because you won. So if you lost, God fought for the other side, right? There's a kind of circularity to the logic there. I'm seeming a little off today. I don't know. These YouTube lectures are not the easiest because I don't want to stop and edit and reshoot, right? So I'm just going to plow ahead, mistakes and stutters and all. Maybe, I've got these pipes here. I might add to the professorial spirit. I actually inherited these from my grandfather, Emmanuel Braff, who was a World War II hero, fought in Normandy and in the Pacific. And when he died, the only thing I asked for were these pipes that he used to smoke, and now I smoke them, once or twice a year. But yeah, they make me feel very professorial. Anyway, you look at pictures of college professors from the 30s or 40s. They always have a pipe and a tweed jacket. I'm wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap, so it doesn't quite complete the image, but they're here. let's talk. All right, so we all, if you know anything about King Lear, the one thing that people know about King Lear is the premise, which is that it's about a king with 3 daughters who decides, foolishly, I guess, to split up his kingdom and give a part to each daughter. And he's got 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia, right? And that name Cordelia, if you know anything about King Lear, you know that she's the good one. But Lear can't see that. So the play begins with a character who's transitioning in his identity, right? And identities, we've talked about identity before a little bit, right? What does it mean to be a king as opposed to just a man? How does kingship shape one's identity? Is there a distinction between the man and the office of the king, or are they one? In this, in Act 1 of King Lear, Lear is not being deposed. He's not being assassinated. He's not dying. He's willingly retiring, basically, right? He's old. He's ready for a sort of relaxed dotage, and he wants to divvy up his will while he's alive. So he calls his 3 daughters in, right? So this is Act 1, Scene 1, page... whoops. Act 1, 1385, line 34. Lear explains what he's doing. I'm not going to get into too many. I really want to focus on a few key specific passages here. But meantime, we shall express our darker purpose. This is line 34, our secret purpose. Right? Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in 3 our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age. Meaning, I'm sick of having responsibilities, doing work. I'm too old. I want somebody else to be in charge, so I'm going to split up the kingdom and leave it to my daughters, right? Yeah, he wants a comfortable, easy retirement. And, I'll salute for that, right? He's got a right to that. But this decision to split his kingdom in 3, even in Shakespeare's time, they would have understood the peril here. What's the problem? There's a couple problems with this, right? If you're splitting your kingdom in 3, you don't have a kingdom anymore. You have 3 little kingdoms, right? And you're also sort of naturally creating rivalries that have a possibility of butting up against each other. The same thing is true with primogeniture. You remember what primogeniture means? We've talked about primogeniture, right? What is primogeniture? That's right. It's the giving of everything to the firstborn son, right? Even in that kind of system where the kingship would just pass to the eldest son, sometimes there's still strife and conflict and everything, but at least there's a sense of unity. The country united behind one ruler, one king. It maintains its integrity. It maintains its territorial, holdings. It maintains its treasury and everything intact. Lear's kind of treating his kingdom almost like a farmer would treat his farm, right? I'm going to split it up amongst my kids. And it turns out to be a really bad decision, but it turns out to be an especially bad decision for some decisions he makes in this first act, right? So what he wants is he wants a little flattery. He wants to have his ego stroked, right? So he tells his daughters, all right, before I announce the holdings, right, I want to hear each one of you tell me how much you love me. And Goneril and Regan totally get how to play this game and lavish him with praise, right? Goneril at line 53, right? Sir, I love you more than word can wield the matter. Dearer than eyesight, space, and liberty. Beyond what can be valued, rich or rare. No less than life with grace, health, beauty, honor. As much as child ever loved or father found. A love that makes breath poor and speech unable. Beyond all manner of so much. I love you. Beautiful, right? Wonderful, right? Cordelia has a quick aside there. She's like, what shall Cordelia speak? Love and be silent. In other words, what am I going to say? How am I going to, ratchet up the rhetoric? And what she quickly decides is that she's just going to be honest and say, I love you, and not kind of pour on all this nonsense. Regan speaks next, and she's even more over the top. My sister comes too short, line 70, that I profess myself, and this is line 70, that I profess myself an enemy to all other joys, which the most precious square of sense professes, and find I am alone felicitate, that is, happy, in your dear highness's love. Nothing else in the world gives me pleasure except your love, which is, of course, an odd thing to say for a woman who, is married. Only your father's love. What about your husband's love? And again, Cordelia is sort of aware of the show that's going on, but she refuses to play the game. And when it comes to her turn, right? So Lear he tells Goneril, here's the part of your kingdom, here's the part of your kingdom, Regan, you've earned this. And then he comes to Cordelia, what do you have to say? And Cordelia says, line 83. Lear says, what can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters? Speak. And Cordelia very famously says, nothing, my lord. And that's the first invocation of a word that will also be of very keen interest to this play. The idea of nothing, or nullity, or zero, or the absence of something. Again, like, it's a very, all right, okay, nothing is nothing, but nothing is an interesting thing to ponder because the idea that of looking into a perfect blackness of nothing, right? There's nothing there. I'm struggling with specificity now because I'm trying to speak in the abstract before we get to those later moments in the play where the idea of nothing comes up again. The fool will talk to Lear about what happens when you give up everything. What are you left with? The play's interest in the idea of nothingness or nothing ties into its questioning of the nature of humanity itself, and we'll see these different obsessions sort of linked together. But Cordelia says nothing. I have nothing to say. Nothing. Lear, nothing, nothing, and then Lear says most famously, nothing will come of nothing. Nothing will come of nothing. And that's a concept. First of all, there's truth to that, right? Nothing comes from nothing. Everything comes from something. Nothing doesn't produce. Nothing doesn't give birth. Nothing doesn't create. Everything must come from something. There's a kind of philosophical idea here that we know to be true in a sense, right? Outside of like the Big Bang or whatever. Something always comes from something. Matter comes from energy. Energy comes from consumption of other things. E equals mc squared, right? There's no such thing as destruction. There's no such thing as nullity. There's no such thing as nothing. Everything comes from something. So Lear is saying nothing will come of nothing. If you give me nothing, you will get nothing, more literally, right? But Cordelia won't play the game. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less. Oh, sorry, I skipped the line, right? Nothing will come of nothing, speak again. Cordelia says at line 89, unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. In other words, I can't take my feelings of love and transform them into verbal language and transform them into a verbal form. When Goneril and Regan did that, it came off as ridiculous. Well, they were lying. I mean, they were bullshitting, right? What Cordelia says is her genuine love can't be transformed into a kind of flattery. It sort of debases it, right? Unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less. I love you as much as I'm supposed to. To say that I love you less would be to wrong you, but to say that I love you more would be to flatter you, to bullshit you. I love your majesty according to my bond, neither more nor less. That's an honest answer. Lear's like, how, Cordelia? Mend your speech a little, lest you may mar your fortunes. Now, at this point in the play, I've always thought, Cordelia is just an old man. Why don't you just give him what he wants? Lay it on a little bit thick. Mend your speech a little, he says. But Cordelia won't. She only will be honest with him. This is her great virtue, right? And it's the virtue that Lear is blind to. But also, just word to the wise, if when somebody is sort of digging for flattery, just give it to them, make them feel good. But in this play, Cordelia has to be the voice of honesty and just say, no, I love you as much as I love you. as much as I'm supposed to love you, and I don't love you more or less. Whatever that means, you know. Good my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return those duties back as our right fit. Obey you, love you, and most honor you. That's a good answer. But it lacks the hyperbolic flattery that of Goneril and Regan, right? And Cordelia points that out. Now, Lear should have been listening to her from the start, right? Because Cordelia is telling him something like, you can't trust people who lie to your face. Which is what Goneril and Regan did. Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? Huh? Right? That's a good point. They have husbands, right? How could they only love you? How could they only take joy in your presence? They have husbands, right? Their love is divided. They're not being honest. They're flattering. Happily, when I shall wed, that lord whose hand must take my plight shall carry half my love with him, half my care and duty. Sure, I shall never marry like my sisters to love my father all. Right? I'm not going to do that. When I get married, my husband will take half, will get my affection too. I'm never going to be like my sisters and marry to love you all. Lear misses the wisdom in this. And this is the onset of the tragedy of the whole play, right? Lear doesn't listen to the one daughter who's telling him the truth. Lear doesn't listen to the one daughter he can actually trust. Instead, he gets angry and he banishes her. And he banishes Kent for sticking up for her. But goes thy heart with this? Aye, my good lord. So young and so untender? He asks, right? You're so young and so cruel. And Cordelia says, no. So young, my lord, and true. Honest. I'm the honest one. Let it be so. Thy truth then shall be thy dower. That's your inheritance, your truth. That's what you get. Are you going to give me truth? Okay, truth's what you get. That's it. For by the sacred radiance of the sun, notice how he doesn't swear by gods or anything, by God or Jesus, right? He's talking about the sun and all that. The mysteries of Hecate, the pagan goddess of, like a goddess of witches or something like that. I mean, Hecate's associated with witchcraft and sort of pagan rituals and stuff like that. What her actual Greek affiliation is, I forget. The mysteries of Hecate and the night, by all the operations of the orbs, from whom we do exist and cease to be, here I disclaim all my paternal care. Cutting her off. Propinquity and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever. That's it. He has disowned her, cast her out. Kent tries to intervene. Good my liege, Lear, peace, Kent. Come not between the dragon and his wrath. Don't interrupt me when I'm yelling at somebody. If you have siblings, and you've ever, your parents have ever been yelling at your brother or your sister, not to get involved in that moment, right? Although, I don't know. It depends on what kind of parents you have, I guess. When somebody's getting a tongue lashing, come not between the serpent and his wrath. Don't stand in the middle of the serpent and the wrath that he's spewing at his target. For you Lord of the Rings fans, you might detect a sonorous note here. I don't know if there are still Lord of the Rings fans. Maybe it's too dated. When I first started teaching, there were lots of Lord of the Rings fans because that was like 2005. And Lord of the Rings is a big deal. I don't know if anybody reads it anymore, but when Éowyn stands between the Witch King of Angmar and Theoden, her father, at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the Nazgul, the Witch King says to her, "Come not between the Nazgul and his prey," right? Which is a perfect line of iambic pentameter. Come not between the Nazgul and his prey, and is obviously a direct echo here of King Lear. Come not between the serpent and his wrath. And when the movie came out in Return of the King, the film, and I was there on opening night, I went to see it opening night with my brother and the now semi-famous comedian Chris Gethard at the IMAX at the Palisades Mall in Nyack. It was a triple feature of all three Lord of the Rings movies the extended editions of the first two back to back, and then the premiere of Return of the King the night before it actually came out. So we were in the movie theater for like 12 hours, and it was, I don't know. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of time I had on my hands when I was 24. Now, not so much. Well, nobody's ever going to the movies again anyway, right? We'll never. That's done. It's just us and Netflix from now on. When the movie came out, Peter Jackson, the screenwriters, changed that line to "Do not come between the Nazgul and his prey," which really upset me. It's the same line basically, but it's no longer iambic pentameter. "Do not come between the Nazgul and his prey" is not blank verse, like the way "come not between the Nazgul and his prey," and it's just such a pointless change. Why change it? It sounds so much better the other way. Anyway, that's my Lord of the Rings rant over. Let's get back on task here. But yeah, come not between the dragon and his wrath. Sorry, dragon and his wrath, serpent and his wrath. There's two different versions of this, right? There's got to be. Hang on, let me check my. I'm gonna check my Arden King Lear here. Is it always dragon, or is it sometimes serpent? King Lear is a very textually complicated play, just like Hamlet. There's a bazillion different versions. This is the kind of stuff that I should not be recording. Right? I should be prepared. Because who cares? Only me, right? No, dragon. It's dragon. I was remembering wrong. Dragon. All right. Come not between the dragon and his wrath. All right. But Kent doesn't listen, right? Kent continues to sort of plead Cordelia's case, so he ends up getting banished too. So we've got Cordelia and Kent, the two loyal people that he should have hung on to, end up getting banished, and now Lear is surrounded by snakes, Goneril and Regan, and there are some other unsavory characters too. And then this is where we come to the B plot of Lear, which is Gloucester and his two sons, Edmund and Edgar. So let's jump ahead to 1-2 here. Edgar. Well, Gloucester has two sons, right? Edmund, his true-born son, and Edgar, his bastard son. Edgar, who was born of an illegitimate marriage. Illegitimate relationship. So, what does it mean to be a bastard in Shakespeare's time, or in Lear's time, I guess, obviously too? It means you lack certain legal rights, right? That you don't have the same legal standing as a true-born son when it comes to your rights of inheritance, property, authority, etc., things like that, right? And 1-2 begins with a soliloquy. There's not that many soliloquies in Lear compared to Hamlet. Hamlet was the great soliloquy play. Lear, there are monologues, there are speeches, but they tend to be spoken to with other people present. Although Lear, in his madness, it's arguable whether he's really talking to somebody or not. But this soliloquy at 1-2 is Edmund venting his feelings about being a bastard. Now, the Gloucester plot and the Lear plot echo each other in some ways, right? And of course they come together in important ways. When Edgar pals up with the evil sisters, right? And Edmund ends up being on the side of the good guys, of course. But just like Lear, Gloucester listens to the wrong child. Edmund lays a trap and fools Gloucester into thinking Edmund has betrayed him, the true-born son. Edmund can get confusing. Even I mix them up in my head sometimes, right? Edmund's the bastard. Edmund sets up a scheme that convinces Gloucester that Edgar is a traitor. It's not true. And Edmund has to go on the run. So again, the good child ends up banished, ends up on the run, while the bad child is right there, waiting to pounce. But 1-2 begins with a speech about bastardy itself, what it means to be a bastard. And it's an interesting speech because it is true in many ways that The distinction between bastardy and true birth is an arbitrary distinction completely created as a manifestation of our intersubjective reality. Remember, we talked about that before, right? Things we just agree are true, even though they have no objective truth. What is the objective difference between a bastard and a true-born son? Nothing, right? The only difference is the arbitrary difference we put on one relationship as opposed to the other. One relationship had a priest or a minister or somebody say some words that made that relationship official. There's nothing real there. There's nothing objectively true, real about that. It's only intersubjectively true. We agree that it's that way, and so it is that way. So bastardy and legitimacy are a very important distinction, right? They're real in the sense that they matter, but they're not objective, right? They're not concrete. They're an invention of our imagination. All right, 1-2, line 1. Enter Edmund. Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law my services are bound. This is it. Why does he invoke nature, as I say, as the lens flare continues behind my head? Nature. Well, if there's a difference between bastardy and legitimacy, it's certainly not in nature, right? Is the biological process that produces bastardy and legitimacy identical? Absolutely it is. Sexual intercourse, birth and delivery, etc. There's no difference, right? In our terms, right, there's a combination of genetic material that creates a new life. And whether a religious figure has said some words about the relationship or whether a government has given you a license, makes no difference to nature. So Edgar here is invoking nature as a kind of equalizer, right? Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law my services are bound. Wherefore, that is why, wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom and permit the curiosity of nations to deprive me for that I am some 12 or 14 moonshines lag of a brother? Why should I stand in the plague of custom? Just because everybody says it, why should I listen? The curiosity of nations, in other words, like the legal things that they hold to, that again are arbitrary, to deprive me of my birthright. Why? Why should I let custom do that? Why bastard? Wherefore base? Bastard, the root of bastard is that word base, and we've talked about the word base before. It means low, right? It means beneath, the thing that's beneath. So we've talked about highborn and baseborn. The root of bastard is also base because the bastard child is below the legitimate child. Why bastard? Wherefore base? When my dimensions are as well compact, my mind is generous, and my shape as true as honest madam's issue. Why brand they us with base, with baseness, bastardy, base, who in the lusty stealth of nature take more composition and fierce quality than doth within a dull, stale, tired bed got to the creating a whole tribe of fops. Go to the creating a whole tribe of fops got tween asleep and wake. There's a lot going on there. I want to go through that slowly, right? But it basically is saying, why am I base? I'm as well put together as he is. As strong, as handsome, as capable. There's no difference between me and Edgar, except for this arbitrary distinction between bastardy and legitimacy. Now, this is all true, and this is all stuff that we can sympathize with, right? Edgar's no dummy. And for us, especially in the kind of culture we live in, that puts a lot less value on blood ties than Shakespeare's did, or on... we no longer have a culture in which illegitimacy of birth means anything of legal significance to the child. Well, that's not true. I shouldn't say that. Not in the way it did in Shakespeare's time, though, right? Why brand they us with base? Look at this line 11. Who in the lusty stealth of nature take more composition and fierce quality then doth within a dull, stale, tired bed go to the creating a whole tribe of fops got tween sleep and wake. We are the product of lusty nature. When people are the product of an illegitimate birth, that means it came about because of sexual intercourse that was passionate, right? That transgressed the bounds of propriety. Whereas legitimate or true-born sons are very often the product of a kind of dutiful intercourse, right? Got between a sleep and awake, right? You know, sort of sex that is not pleasurable so much as it is responsible. So what he's saying is we have a lot more fire in our blood because we are the products of passion. Well then, legitimate Edgar, I must have your land. Our father's love is to the bastard Edmund as to the legitimate. You know, father loves me. To his credit, Gloucester does love Edmund and Edgar both equally. As to the legitimate. Fine word, legitimate. Well, my legitimate, if this letter speed and my invention thrive, Edmund the base shall to the legitimate. Right? I'll become the legitimate one if my scheme succeeds. He's got the letter, the forged letter that says that that Edgar's a traitor. Yada yada. Edgar's a traitor. We don't have to get into all the details right now. I grow, I prosper. Now, gods, stand up for bastards. And it's a great sort of villain's monologue, but it's also, a lot of it is true, right? Fine word, legitimate. I mean, what does it even mean, legitimate? Again, nothing. Nothing objective, right? Nothing concrete. Only subjective, only intersubjective differences, only cultural, contrived difference between legitimacy and bastardy, right? Which is, Edgar is very right to say. So he wants Edgar's land, he wants Edgar's inheritance, he's gonna take it, he's gonna get it by dispossessing Edgar the same way that Lear dispossessed Cordelia. And of course he succeeds. Edmund winds up on the run. There's a lot going on, of course. Now let's see what to do next. This thing is already, we're at 40 minutes. Let me talk through some stuff without looking at specific passages, right? Acts 1 and 2 deal with some transitional material. We have to get the characters that we need out of the court environment, right? If you can call it that even, into the wilderness. So Cordelia has been banished. She's off to France, right? Then she'll return in the nick of time, as we know later. Or not really in the nick of time, because it's a tragedy. If it were a comedy, it would be the nick of time. Edmund is now homeless, on the run. And Lear very soon will be as well. Kent is banished, right? So Kent adopts a kind of disguise, right? He starts talking with a funny accent and dresses starts dressing differently, changes the way he talks, right? Sort of adopts a disguised identity, right? As does Edmund as well, right? Edgar as well. Edgar on the run also has to adopt a different identity. So that, again, they're on the run, they're fugitives. At least Edgar is. Kent's not so much a fugitive as he is just banished. So let's see. Let's skip over some of the stuff with Lear and Goneril. But basically, Lear quickly finds out that the daughters that he thought were the good daughters are not the good daughters, and that they're kind of conspiring to whittle away his train. A train is like a posse, right? They're your hangers-on, the people that sort of follow you around everywhere. And part of Lear's agreement with Goneril and Regan was that he would get to keep 100 knights in his retinue as his personal train. And Goneril and Regan are both complaining about this. They're loud, they're boisterous, they're noisy, they eat too much. There's probably a lot of truth to that. But still, Lear has had this promise. And to Lear, this maintenance of a retinue, of a posse of followers, is important to his identity as a great man, a former king. And he doesn't want to give them up. So let's see. Let's jump ahead to Act 2. So much we can't cover. Kent in the stocks. All right. Let's look at 2-3 and talk about Edgar's transformation. Sorry, I've got some notes in my... Yeah, so this is Act 2, Scene 2, line... Actually, sorry, in our version it's 2-3. I just want to check my notes there. Act 2, Scene 3. This is Edgar talking about how his whole identity has been shaken by his banishment. He's gone from being the Duke of Gloucester's son to being a fugitive, and he's going to have to adopt a new identity in order to evade his pursuers. In the same way Kent adopted a new identity. One of the things we're seeing already in this play is the kind of fluidity of the idea of identity itself, right? Are we one fixed thing? If we are, can that be changed? If we can change, if we can shift, do we really have a fixed identity at all? All right, Act 2, Scene 3. I heard myself proclaim, that is proclaimed an outlaw, right? They're after me. I heard, this is Edgar speaking after he's run off, being tripped up by by Edmund's scheme. I heard myself proclaimed, and by the happy hollow of a tree escaped the hunt. No port is free, no place that guard in most unusual vigilance does not attend my taking. You know, they're looking for me everywhere. There's no place I can go. Everywhere there are men who know who I am and have gotten the orders to bring me in. Whiles I may escape, I will preserve myself and am bethought to take the basest and most poorest shape that ever penury in contempt of man brought near to beast. So I will preserve myself by taking a new shape. And what kind of shape? This is line 7. The basest and most poorest shape that ever penury is poverty, that ever penury in contempt of man brought near to beast. I'm going to transform myself into the lowest form of humanity I can imagine, which will turn out to be a sort of a homeless madman, right? A lunatic derelict who goes by the moniker Tom O'Bedlam. That ever penury and contempt of man brought near to beast. So I'm going to bring myself right to the threshold of human and animal by making myself as low as I can. My face I'll grime with filth, blanket my loins, elf all my hairs in knots. All right, so I'm going to tousle my hair all wild. I'm going to put on a loincloth. I'm going to smear my face with dirt, right, and filth. And with presented nakedness outface the winds and persecutions of the sky. The country gives me proof and precedent of bedlam beggars. You know what bedlam is, right? Bedlam, the lunatic asylum, right? So I know that people like this exist. Bedlam beggars who with roaring voices strike in their numbed and mortified arms, pins, wooden pricks, nails, sprigs of rosemary, and with this horrible object from low farms, poor pelting villages, sheepcotes and mills, sometimes with lunatic bands, sometimes with prayers, enforce their charity. So I've heard of beggars who do crazy things, right? Who mutilate themselves with nails and pricks and pins, right? And who shout at people on the street, right? Begging for money. I'm going to make myself like that. The lowest form of humanity you can imagine. Poor Turley God, which is a word that nobody knows what it means. Poor Tom. There's something, that's something yet. Edgar, I nothing am. Edgar, I nothing am. So I'm now Tom of Bedlam. Edgar, I nothing am. Which is an interesting line, which could mean I'm no longer Edgar, right? But also, in no longer being Edgar, I am now nothing. It brings us back to that idea of nothing. Can identity be stripped away? Can we become nothing? Well, he's not nothing. He's Tom of Bedlam. But in comparison to what he was, that is obviously greatly reduced. He's going to bring himself as near to beast as possible. This is one of the first times the play touches on this idea of how low can you bring a man, a human being, before he becomes nothing more than an animal. It's not the last time the play talks about it, that's for sure. And we'll get to that next time. But to wrap things up today, let's talk about Lear being banished. Not banished, but running away. He finally has enough of Goneril and Regan, because Goneril and Regan kind of trap him. One of them says, well, you got to get rid of some of your knights. And he gets angry and he goes to the other one and she says, well, no, if you're going to stay here, you got to get rid of even more of your knights. So he goes back to the other. No, I don't think we need even that many. So they keep sort of stripping away the numbers in his retinue. So let's see. This is Act 2, Scene 4. Line 230. Let's take it from there. Lear says, "Is this well spoken? In other words, this is a nice thing to say to your father, like to take away my knights from me." Regan says, "I dare avouch it, sir. What, 50 followers? 50 knights? Is it not well? What should you need of more? Yea, or so many, sit that both charge and danger speak against so great a number. How in one house should many people under 2 commands hold amity? 'Tis hard, almost impossible." I mean, she's probably got a point there, right? Who the hell wants to house 100 followers, or even 50 followers? That's a lot of people to have in one house. Everything you need, you can get from us. We can feed you, we can clothe you, we can protect you with our men. You don't need 100 guys. You don't need 50 guys. Goneril says, "Why might not you, my lord, receive attendance from those that she calls servants, or from mine?" Right? In other words, we have servants. That's enough. You just call them. You need something, you ask one of our servants. You don't need your followers. You don't need your retinue. You don't need it. It's fine. Or why, and Regan, "Why not, my lord? If then they chance to slack ye, we could control them. If you will come to me, for now I spy a danger, I entreat you to bring but 25. No more will I give place for notice." Right? If you want to come with live with me, Regan says, if you're mad at Goneril, that's fine, but you can't bring more than 25 guys. So we've gone from 100 to 50 to 25. It's doing the opposite of Falstaff's attackers in Henry IV Part 1. They kept growing. Lear's retinue keeps shrinking. Lear says, "I gave you all, Regan, and in good time you gave it." Lear, "Made you my guardians, my depositaries, but kept the reservation to be followed with such a number," right? I gave you everything, but I kept these 100 men for myself. What, must I come to you with 25, Regan? Said you so? And speak it again, my lord. No more with me. So then he goes back to Goneril and says, "Fine, I'll go with thee. Your 50 is still better than her 25. And Goneril says, "Hear me, my lord. What need you 25? 10 or 5 to follow in a house where twice so many have a command to tend you?" And then Regan says, finally, they get to where they're going, "What need 1? Right? Why do you need 25? Why do you need 10? Why do you need 5? Why do you need even 1? You don't need any of those guys. You don't need any men. You don't need any retinue at all. Why is it so important to Goneril and Regan to get rid of this retinue? I mean, I think there's the practical concerns that they don't want to house and clothe and put up with all these men, but also it's about taking away from Lear the last vestiges of his authority and making sure that really it's just vested in them. Goneril and Regan really are in charge, not Lear anymore. And what need 1, Regan says. And then Lear responds with one of the most famous lines in the play, and one of the things to really chew over here. Lear says, "Oh, reason," this is line 259, "reason not the need." Which means, don't ask me to explain the need. This is not about need. What need 1? Reason not the need. Don't make me explain why I need it. It's not about necessity. And he continues, our basest beggars are in the poorest thing superfluous. That requires a little bit on. Superfluous means extra. And what he means is that even the poorest person, our basest beggars, have things that they don't need, right? Because having things that you don't need is part of being human. Think about the things that you have, right? How many of them do you need? Almost none of them. But what kind of creature has only what it needs? An animal, right? Being human in part is about having attachment to things that are superfluous, that go beyond need. That's the great blessing of being human. Whether it's your laptop or your cell phone or Lear's 100 Nights, right? We all have things that we want that are part of us that make life, that make being human more than being an animal. We all have a superfluity. We all have things that are extra, even our basest beggars, right? No matter how poor you are, you have things or you want things that you don't need strictly, right? Reason, not the need. Our basest beggars are in the poorest thing superfluous. Allow not nature. More than nature needs, man's life is cheap as beasts. What makes a human being not an animal? In part, it's our ability to have things that we don't need and to treasure things that we don't need. I mean, there's, a fox out in the woods doesn't think about things beyond what it needs. It's thinking about survival. Human civilization has gifted us with the great blessing of being able to ponder things beyond immediate necessity. And although it may not seem like it right now, trapped as we all are in our homes, that has led to the great wealth of experiences and joys that being human can lead us towards. Extra, superfluity, pleasures. For Lear, these 100 men are about his sense of himself and who he is. A man who has followers, who has men that he can control and that obey him. Not just living on his daughter's servants, but having his own. Thou art a lady, he says to Regan. Thou art a lady, if only to go warm were gorgeous. Why, nature needs not what thou gorgeous wearest, which scarcely keeps thee warm. You get what he's saying there, right? You're a woman, right? What do women like? What do all women like, right? It's some stereotyping going on here. Women love clothes and shopping for clothes and love to wear beautiful fashions because they need it to keep them warm. The point of clothing was originally to protect us from from exposure to the elements, right? An important thing in this play as well, right? But nobody thinks of clothes that way anymore. We think of clothes, sure, in part, but we think of clothes more now as a way of augmenting our identity to be a certain way. But for true need, line 265 we're at. But for true need, Act 2-4, line 265. But for true need, you heavens, give me that patience I need. You see me here, you gods, a poor old man, as full of grief as age, wretched in both. If it be you that stirs these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely. He's talking to the gods now. Are you doing this? Are you the ones that are making my daughters act like this? And one of the big themes of the play is, no, we make our own choices, right? There might be some kind of fate or whatever, or fortune, but we can't blame the gods for our troubles. This is Goneril and Regan doing this, not the gods. Touch me with noble anger, and let not women's weapons, water drops, stain my man's cheeks. Don't let me start crying like a woman. That's a woman's strategy, to start crying. I won't do it, but of course he is crying, right? He's losing it. No, you unnatural hags. I will have such revenges on you both, that all the world shall... I will do such things... What they are yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth. Great use of pauses and dashes there. Look at what happens in those lines, line 275. Lear's vowing revenge, and what he says, 273 from the unnatural hags line. No, you unnatural hags, I will have such revenges on you both that all the world shall... Pause. Dash, right? Doesn't finish that sentence. I will do such things... Pause. Dash. No end of that sentence. And then, what they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth. He can't think of what he's going to do. He can't name what he's going to do because all of a sudden, for the first time in his life, he has no agency to do anything like that. He cannot exact revenge. He has no friends. He has no allies. He has no followers. He's nothing. They've taken everything from him. All of his identity as an authority figure has been stripped away. He's now just an old man. And so he just sort of finishes sort of lamely, impotently, like, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be bad. You think I'll weep? No, I'll not weep. I have full cause of weeping. And then the thunder peals from, the bangs from outside, the lightning. You hear the storm and tempest from outside. But this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws, or ere I'll weep. Oh, fool, I shall go mad. We'll talk more about the fool next time. But that's it. Lear ends up out in the wilderness with nothing, with just his fool and Kent. The act ends with Cornwall, who's Regan's wife, saying, "Shut up your doors, my lord. 'Tis a wild night." The weather's really bad out there, and now Lear's out in it alone, as is Edgar, and Cordelia is off somewhere far, far away. So all our important characters are sort of scattered to the winds, and the middle of the play is about how they face down the elements, especially Lear and the Fool and Edgar and Kent. All right, well, let's stop there. Oof, an hour. Sorry, that was a long one. Have questions, feel free to email me. I hope you're enjoying the play. I'll try to post some video clips if I can find some good ones that I can package nicely. But for now, keep reading. Try to get through Act 3 by the end of this week. And I'll have a second lecture on the second half of this play coming up at some point. All right, so stay safe, stay inside. Don't go to the supermarket if you don't have to. Shelter in place. I don't want you to stress out too much about this class. Just keep reading. Drop me a line. If you feel like it. If you have any questions about anything, and I will get the paper assignment to you soon, so that you know what you're going to be doing for the last grade in this class. All right. Adios. I'll see you next lecture. Bye.